This is coffee number 5. I'm your host, Lara Schmoisman. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to coffee number 5. And I have to say, my cup is almost empty. But today I'm ready for a good conversation, like always. And you know what? I was always thinking before we started podcast, what are we going to be talking about? But today's guest, he told me, you know what? It's not so much about me. It's about the industry, and there's a lot of interesting things happening in the industry. So I was like, let's do it. And this is fascinating. I'm so happy to have you here, Sampo. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. So
Okay,
happy to have a conversation.
this is so humble from you, being the CEO of Revive and Revive. Sorry, and I mean, you have an incredible journey, and tell us a little more about you. We want to get to know you and how you get to be where you are today.
Yeah, definitely. Like I said, I don't want this to be all about me, but I think
Let's make it a little bit about
let's
you.
make it let's have a little short background. I started Revive 9 years ago, more than 9 years ago, and I think the origin story is pretty interesting because it started from a very personal problem. I moved. I'm Finnish, so I'm native from Finland, and I moved from Finland to Chicago for a couple of years, and I started having a lot of skin issues. I actually wasn't in the industry. I wasn't in beauty before that, right? I was in retail. I was working with retailers. I was working with brands, but I wasn't in beauty. And I started having these skin issues, and my wife was telling me, she was like, "You got to go to the dermatologist. You got to get it checked out." And
You have a good
and
wife there.
yeah, a very good one. She's the best, absolutely. But I was lazy, as many men are, by the way, for skincare, and
Yes.
particularly 10 years ago. I was lazy, and I was like, no, 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 no. I'm not gonna do that. And eventually, I did go, and I had taken pictures of myself. So I spoke to the dermatologist, and I was like, okay, what could you tell me about me if I wasn't here, if it was just these pictures? And I really started thinking about this, and I said, how do people really know which products they should be using? And particularly, how do they know when it comes to digital channels? I mean, I know you can go to an Ulta store, you can go to a Sephora store, and you'll have the beauty advisor there. They know all the products. They can actually give you advice. They can give you recommendations. But what about things that are happening online? What about things that are happening, in mobile apps and so forth? Like, how do people actually find the right products for them and get comfortable with the fact that, this, because again, these purchases in beauty, these are really the most personal products you're ever going to buy, right? These are really the most personal products you're ever going to
Yes.
buy. And, you can have an allergic reaction, something can go wrong. You want to be really sure that what the products you're buying are going to be right for you. And
Mhm.
that's when we kind of came up with this idea that we can actually use technology and AI in particular to really help the consumer, and I should say even enable brands and retailers to help the consumer buy the right products. And I think that's a very very core mission for us even today. That we can leverage technology. And again, we started 10 years ago, where I should say AI was not really even a thing. Like, if you would have asked 10 years ago, what is AI? I mean, most
Yeah,
brands, most
that's what
retailers, most
what I was.
consumers,
That's what I was thinking. Like that was really early stages of AI. How did you go about that? Because back then you ambitious this as AI, or only were ambition this about photography and some lens on. How did this started? Because did you have the tools of AI, or even think
yeah.
where AI will be today?
Well, I mean, to be honest, we had no idea how AI as a technology was going to develop. I mean, we did start from AI. We did start, we didn't call it AI back then. We had machine learning, deep learning, these people
Okay.
use these types of terms, but in the end of the day, I mean, it was AI because again, like we were started very firmly from skincare, and we started, trying to solve the consumer problem of, if I'm going to a Sephora website, or if I'm going to a retailer's website, or even a brand's website, a retailer may have 5,000 products, a brand may have 100 products. How do I know which ones to buy? And I think, we started using AI specifically to solve that problem. But again, we had no idea how big the technology was going to be. But I think for us, what I think is really important, and what's really important for me is that, yes, we're a technology company, and, yes, we're proud to work with more than 120 brands and retailers, across 5 continents today. But it's really never been about the technology. It's been about what is the challenge that the brand or retailer has? What is the business challenge that they have when it comes to growing their business, serving their customers, helping their customers find and buy the right products? And then let's just figure out, because we are technologists at heart, let's figure out what is the best technology to use to solve that problem. But we start from that. Like, we don't start from the technology. The technology is just an enabler. It's something that we use to help brands and retailers solve actual business problems.
Mm-hmm.
Um, which also, I think it's maybe even more revolutionary today than it was 10 years ago, because today it seems like everything's all about the technology, AI this, AI that, AI is everywhere. But I still think that, that technology like AI, I mean, in the end of the day, it's just technology, right? I mean, unless
What,
you
what I
really
love
use it for it.
what I love about your concept is that you say
Mm,
we are resolving a problem that the brands had or the retailer had.
mm.
But at the end of the day, what you were doing is resolving the consumer problem.
Yes, yes, yeah, exactly. And I think, again, that's where we started. I started looking at this as a consumer myself first, right?
Hmm.
And I think, you know, again, and I would say that, when the consumer has a problem, like finding the right products, figuring out, what they should buy, where they should buy it from, what's right for them, that very very quickly turns into a problem for the retailer brand, because it's something that limits their ability to serve the customer, it limits their ability to grow, it limits their ability to generate revenue and improve their business. And so, but you're right, you're absolutely right, that's where we started from, is kind of solving that issue, fundamentally for the consumer.
So now let's talk about the beauty industry, because you told me that there are very exciting things going on in the beauty industry, and now I want to know it all.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, I actually think, this is probably the most exciting time, at least again in the 10 years that I've been in this business, to really be in beauty. Because, I think that, the playing field for a lot of brands, a lot of retailers, it's actually more even than it's ever been. So if I kind of look back and I look at beauty, I mean, 10 years ago or 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you have the massive conglomerates, you have the L'Oreals and the Shiseidos of the world. And obviously they're still very big. They're still very, very powerful. They have a lot of reach and a lot of great brands. But they were really, really dominant. Like, they were really dominant in the distribution that they had, in how they could reach customers, and, in the awareness that they could generate for consumers. And I think right now, like, that's so fundamentally changed. I think, there are so many great brands out there, like
There.
so many great brands out there. I mean, every week I sort of read about a new sort of great brand launch, and I learn about a new fantastic brand, and I just think it's for the consumer, like, there's so many choices, right? It's really, it's really probably the best time to kind of be in this industry. And I think the other thing, which I think is pretty interesting, is, again, if I look at, like, pre-COVID, I look at the beauty industry, I would say, there's kind of makeup, and then there's skincare, and then there's some other
And
stuff.
now they're
and
so
and now
divided.
it's like everything is kind of interlinked. It's almost like skin health, kind of beauty, wellness. It's in the mind of the consumer. It's all the same. You've got multi-purpose products. You've got, brands like Imaray's Beauty, for example. You've got the kind of the beauty products that you can, kind of edible, for example. Um,
But let me
like,
ask you a
yeah.
question. Do you think that brands now, because of all these subdivisions, and there are so many brands, every brand needs to be a little more specialized or having a better target audience? Because, yeah, because
Yeah, I mean, I do think that, on one sense, like, it is obviously harder for brands to kind of get through the noise, because there's a lot, right? There's a lot of, brands out there. Um, but I actually think it's a good thing because it really forces all brands to really think about kind of what are they and who are they for and why? Like who do they serve and why? What's their purpose? What is their mission? What are they driven by? So I think it's it, they have to be very specific about who they're serving, what are they providing, and for whom. But I actually think it's a good thing. It's really a good thing because I mean personally I think every brand they need to have they should have always had kind of a center focus, like this is who we are as a brand, this is what we represent, this is who we serve, this is why we exist. And
Yeah,
I think
and these are
you
our
know
values. We don't need to align with everyone anymore.
exactly. So I think the fact that there's just so many alternatives for the consumer, it almost kind of forces brands to kind of come back to their roots and say, okay, these are our values, this is who we are for, and
And,
this is why.
and how do you think that the merging of so many smaller brands and bigger retailers are starting to adopt those brands? How is affecting to larger brands and how they need to reformulate their thought to still be successful? Of course, they're going to be
Hmm.
successful, but do you think that
Yeah.
they need to make
Yeah.
changes?
Well, I think that the playbook on how do you build and grow a brand, I think that has to obviously evolve. I think, there was a time where, you could just get some celebrity endorsements, for example, and you could put a whole bunch of money into marketing and, you could generate revenue. And that's probably true still today, but only for a very limited period of time. If you want to be successful for the long term, um, you have to really be able to connect and build a relationship with the consumer so that the consumers feel like whoever your consumers are, whatever your audience is, they feel like you as a brand are kind of on their side. You're guiding them and helping them, with better skin, better health, better kind of makeup preferences, whatever it is. You're not just trying to push product on them. You're actually trying to help them buy the things that the consumer wants. And I think I think it's an adaptation, particularly for some of the larger brands who've kind of maybe been accustomed to the fact that they can overspend, they can just spend
But
whatever,
let me
and
ask
they'll
you a
get the customer.
question. You don't think that sometimes by having so many options and so many variables, and many of them, those are marketing made, as are we overcomplicating beauty?
So I would like to think that we're not, right? I would like to think
Okay.
that. But I do think that, you're right. I do think that, well, let's put it this way. First of all, I think the beauty consumer is smarter than they've ever been. They're more informed than they've ever been. So if you're just creating another brand or creating another product line, putting some marketing spin on it, and there's no real kind of hard solid core to what you are as a brand. It's all just marketing spin. I
Mm-hmm.
do think the consumer today is too smart. You can't fool the consumer. Like they'll try that product once and they'll go, okay, but this is kind of not what I'm looking for. Um, so I don't think those brands will have staying power. I do think that
But
the
at
brands
the
have to have.
same at the same time, we're having all these. I'm a truly believer as a
Mm,
marketer in performance, that a
mm,
brand need to work for a person or a client
mm,
or individual, or otherwise I cannot sell it long term. But at the
yes.
same time, you have all these celebrity endorsed brands that it's all about the celebrity. So how can we
Mm,
justify a smarter consumer when
mm,
we have all the celebrities that is who is behind the
yeah.
product?
Well, I think like if you think about kind of the celebrity, and there's a lot of these celebrity driven brands, there's a lot of, I mean, you've got the Fenty Beauties by Rihanna, you've got, all the Kylie Cosmetics and all these things. I think in the end of the day, like if it's really just about the celebrity and not the product working or performing, for the consumer, you can get a boost. Like you can get a short time boost by a celebrity. And the bigger
Like
the celebrity, the
like
bigger the boost,
one
right?
hit wonder.
One hit wonder, right? And you can always do that. I mean, you can always do that. But I think again, the consumer is going to find that out. Like the consumer is going to find that out. Like if the quality of the product doesn't match up to the kind of promise. Like again, if you have a really big celebrity, like if you've got I don't know, if you've got Taylor Swift, and I don't actually know if she has a beauty brand already. She may, but if you think about Taylor Swift creating a beauty brand, I can guarantee you a lot of people would buy that.
Now you put it in the universe.
Now I put it in the universe. Now she's going to start a beauty brand if she doesn't have one already. But but I do think like in the end of the day, like if you want to succeed long term, right? You have to have a solid foundation, like and a solid purpose, and the product needs to really work. And you have to find an audience, and you have to be able to connect with that audience as well. Like not just push product, but actually I would almost say like build a relationship. Like the consumer needs to feel like you as a brand, you actually care about them, right? So you're not just
How,
trying to sell to them.
how do you feel? Because I noticed that there are a lot of brands that they want to the founder story. The other ones are
Mm,
the founder's values. The others are saying, "Oh, we have a philanthropy." Uh,
mm,
at the end of the day, I think sometimes brands might be losing the focus on what the brand is for and who is our consumer and what problem
mm,
we're resolving, because you're resolving the problem. In addition, as a brand, you want to make later on a donation. I think is great. But are we confusing the messaging of the brand as, okay, this is a brand story, the founder story, this is our
mm.
philanthropy? I feel like
Yeah.
sometimes it's too much.
Yeah, I think you're right. And I think I think that's also part of why it's an exciting time to be in beauty, because I do think that messaging needs to become really clear for the consumer. I mean, a founder and a founder's story, and if you have a brand that's really built around the founder, that is a very powerful story to tell. Like it can be a very powerful, it can be something that customers relate to. It can be something that kind of brings them together. It can be something that forms a community around your brand. So that can be very powerful. And if you have that, like that's something to focus on. Like all the and I would rather see brands keep it simple around a core topic like that, rather
Mhm.
than convolute that by, I don't know, adding things like philanthropy is great, but you don't have to add that into the same thing. Like you
And
can,
also the
you know,
brand that it almost is not making not money. That philanthropy is not
yes.
going to help anyone. I prefer that the brand helping a brand grow a lot, and they say, no, now that you grow, go and give a donation.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like you can layer on a lot of things, once you are kind of successful. Like you can do a lot of kind of things, a lot of positive things, a lot of good in the world. But I think that, you're absolutely right that, it is a time, and I think the fact that there are so many brands for consumers, it acts like a forcing function because you have to focus the message. You can't be all over the place. Like
No.
you can't afford it because the consumers, I mean, I'm sorry to say, but the attention span that you get from the consumers, that's getting shorter and shorter. So you got to be very crisp on the message so that, it really clicks.
And also, your consumer is everywhere, but at the same time, it's not everywhere. So you need to see
Yes.
where you're gonna get the best conversion from your consumer, and hone in more content in that space and interaction
Hmm.
in that space. Your
Yes.
consumer it might be everywhere because everyone has accounts in every platform, but every
Yes.
consumer has a favorite platform to buy. And I always say that, and this is a big controversy with a lot of people, but I know I'm right. And no, I that you need to be in platforms and marketplaces like Amazon and other places, because if your consumer
Mm,
is a consumer of Amazon, they're going to be buying
mm,
there anyway. So they're going to go and see
yeah.
you in social media and then go search for it in Amazon.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that, the key there for me is that you have to be where your target audience is. Like, you
Yeah,
have to meet them where they are. Like, you can't force them to go and the other thing is like, this is again a very controversial topic, and maybe even some of our customers won't like me saying this, but even if I think about platforms like TikTok, like, I think particularly last year I went to a bunch of conferences and everybody's saying like TikTok shop, TikTok shop, TikTok shop. I'm like, okay, that's great. Like, I'm sure it is a great channel for some brands to generate revenue. There's a
but
lot of influencers there. But if your customers aren't there, like, what are you doing there?
exactly,
Like, you know,
exactly. Like we are TikTok shop partners, and I can tell
mm,
you, building a TikTok shop, it takes time. It's not that it
yes.
happened overnight, and and it takes a big investment to start seeing results. But you
Hmm.
need to be. really known if your consumer is there. If it's not there, like for example, I have one of our brands that it's for more
Mm,
mature audience. Yeah, the consumer might be there, but it might not be feel comfortable buying onto
mm.
you.
Exactly. And I think that's also where I think a lot of the brands like going back to their roots and like who are they for? What is what is their purpose? Who is their customer really? I think that's really sort of healthy to have a really conscious sort of think about that, because otherwise you end up in this game where you're just trying to chase the next marketing channel. You're trying to chase the next,
Yep.
next trend. And again, I would much rather see brands just stay true to who and what they are and kind of stay in their lane, as opposed to ones where they're kind of trying to catch every wave,
Yeah. Uh,
possible.
as a marketer, and I'm very data driven like you are,
Mm,
and but something that I've been seeing in the last few years is the market was started to be divided, and it's something I'm
mm,
old school, but at the beginning it was brand and growth and branding, it was all together part of marketing.
mm,
Now there are a lot of branding and then growth, and it's like the message is diluted because we make a branding everything about the packaging, the looks, and not about the consumer.
mm. Yeah, no, I do agree. I think it is a time where again we have to bring the consumer back to the kind of center of the equation, right? Because I mean,
Mhm.
fundamentally, and just like we do with technology, for us as well. I mean, again, yes, we sell to brands and retailers, and we help them, create this personalized AI powered experience. But at the end of the day, like the consumer doesn't, if their consumer doesn't use it, if their consumer isn't engaged by it, if their consumer doesn't love it, well, we lose too. Like, so,
Yep.
so I think at the end of the day, the consumer has to be at the center. Like, it has to be, you know, th- that's why we're in this business. Like, we're in
Yep.
this business for the consumer, right? And
Yeah.
and
One of
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
no, I was just gonna say, like, it's one of these kind of sobering thoughts that I don't think we should ever lose. But sometimes, it's kind of forgotten, along all
Yeah,
the
it's
all the
the
noise.
same that I have this conversation so many times a week that people, when they think
Mm,
about SEO, they think about finding their brand. And SEO is so much more than that. Bef-
mm,
Not only because SEO is about this being discovered. It's about finding
yes.
who's your target audience and what they're looking for. But now also SEO is across all the channels, even in social
Yes.
media. And even
Hmm.
you have for AI technology, we need to do structure the SEO differently.
Oh
SEO
yeah.
is so, and I see when I do audits all the time, and I see brands that only are ranking with their name and their products' names. And that's such a big mistake. It's not
Mm.
about our brand only. That's our
No,
DNA
it's
and it
about the
should be there.
consumer, right?
Consumer.
It's about the
Exactly.
consumer, right? And that's true. And I think that's where, this is also, I mean, again, I do think, there was this, very recent announcement, you mentioned AI there with kind of open AI and Shopify and then kind of
Hmm.
partnering up and so forth. And I think that is a big wake up call because, they wouldn't be doing a partnership like that, if they wouldn't be seeing a lot of consumers actually looking to discover things through ChatGPT, through kind of LLMs. And I do think it kind of demonstrates to a lot of brands and a lot of retailers like, hey, we have to be discoverable. Like we have
Yeah.
to and the consumer's not going to go and find us on our brand or on our product's name.
They're not
Like,
going to find us if they don't know that we exist.
no, like they're gonna say, hey, I want a red lipstick, or it's like, yes, what's the best moisturizer for me? Like that's what they're trying to
Yeah.
find. It was like I have a wedding, like I want a wedding look, like that's what they're trying to find, right? And
Yeah.
and and it, yeah,
It's all
you have
about,
to be discoverable.
yeah, and this is about, I think the search terms change a lot, but it changed more, it's about the intention. It's an intentional
Hmm.
search.
Yes,
So what we need,
yes,
all the algorithms have changed, even Amazon has changed, Google,
yes.
when they go for the search intention, they don't go for the
Mm-hmm.
search terms anymore.
Yeah, yeah, and I do think like that's again, and this kind of goes back to what I was mentioning earlier, which is about kind of brands sort of rethinking, how they're serving consumers, saying, okay, it's not about us, it's not about our products, but it's about how can we help the consumer? How can we help the consumer buy? How can we help the consumer find the right products? How can we help the consumer solve whatever thing they're looking to solve, like whether it's a wedding they're going to, or whether it's, I don't know, whether it's that summer's coming and they need, they need something, a
Yeah.
skincare product with SPF, whatever it is. You know, I think that, that is I think a fundamental opportunity for brands as well, and that's also yet another part where I'm kind of excited to see how this industry evolves, because I think there's a lot of opportunity for brands there to just say, hey, look, we exist for the consumer. We're just going to help the consumer, and if we help the consumer, they're going to buy from us,
Yeah,
right? And that's
absolutely.
that's it.
I always think about being a giver.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you need to give, and at some point people are gonna come back to you. It's like karma. It comes
Yeah,
back.
exactly. And I just think it's never been as important that it is today, because I mean, like I said, there are so many great products, there's so many great brands, just because you are natural, or just because you have a great founder story, just because you have, you're organic, you're sustainable, whatever, like that's not enough anymore, because there's so many. There's just so many great alternatives that you got to really speak to the consumer and say, hey, tell the consumers like, hey, we're here to help you. We're here to help you find the right products. We're here to help you buy. And if you can instill that into your target audience, like, you're going to be successful. You're going to be much more successful than the folks that are just going out there and just saying, okay, we're just thinking about what's the next marketing channel, what's the next customer
Yeah.
acquisition channel. How do we get more consumers? How do we sell more?
And I
So
think
yeah.
also there is a confusion. Everyone talks about a pretty word out there called ROAS. And at the
Mm.
beginning of a brand, it's not about ROAS. It's about brand awareness.
Yes, yes, it's exactly that, and I think again, I mean, I do think that if I think about again, I don't want to put kind of I always like to think of the example of the luxury brands, right?
Hmm.
Again, which again are not not all beauty brands, but the luxury brands, right? I mean, the reason that they are long-term successful is because they've been very consistent, very thoughtful about this is who we are for, this is what we represent, these are our values, and we're going to continue doing this year after year after year after year. It's not about the quick win. Like,
No.
our return on ad spend, that's the quick win, right?
Yes.
But again, like, it's not about the quick win, right? It's about finding that audience, who you are for, whose problem you're actually solving, and sticking with that, and just kind of doing that over and over again consistently. And you know and I think that's where this is also where you have these brands that kind of have these moments when they just blow up, right? They just
Yeah.
absolutely skyrocket. But what you don't see is that usually, if you really look at those brands very closely and you look at the stories behind them, they've been at it for years. They've been working on it for years and years and years and years, consistently, same message, same thing, very thoughtful, very
I,
targeted,
I'm
and
gonna
at some
put it
point they blow up.
I'm gonna put it out there, and I know that people won't like what I'm gonna say, but launching a brand is expensive. And it's
Hmm.
not only about the product, it's the
Mm,
cost of launching a brand, your marketing to do things right is expensive. And if you don't have
mm,
that budget to do it consistently, it's gonna take more time. But what
yeah.
is really important that you are very choosy and exclusive. Don't be that brand that tries to be everywhere for this quick sell, because
Yes.
that's the only thing that it's gonna do is gonna dilute your brand.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think that it's I would say that it feels kind of very easy to kind of start a brand, but I think it's more difficult than ever to be long-term successful, because like you said, I mean, it takes capital, it takes persistence, it takes a lot of consistency over a long period of time, and it takes a lot of focus to be successful, and that's how you see these sort of overnight successes 10, 15 years in the making. So yeah.
So, Shambo, I cannot go without talking to you about this because I think it's important. I think that in the last year or two, we were having like an overload of AI.
Yeah.
Five
Yeah.
years ago, I remember going to conferences and there were some talks about the AI, and we were like 10 people listening to it. And because people thought that we are not that close, we are not that ready. And
Yeah.
then 2 years ago, it exploded, and people are trying still to catch up how to give prompts to ChatGPT. But anyway, I think we had an overload and a huge and fast learning curve. So,
Hmm.
do you think that this stop, that we got to a point that is going to slow down? And what do you think that is coming for the AI world in the beauty industry? What's next?
No, that's a good question. So I do agree with you. I think, in the aftermath of kind of, ChatGPT sort of launching, where I mean, like I said, we've been using AI for 10 years, so we kind of knew what it could do in the background. But I think what ChatGPT really did is an open AI. They really kind of open it up to everybody, to the average consumer. It's like, wow, this thing is actually real. And obviously the technology's gotten really good, in the last couple of years. But I do think that what kind of happened were a couple of things, which is, well, first of all, I do think the technology is here to stay. Right, I do think it's here to
Mhm.
stay. I don't think it's just a fad, but I do think that what happened there for a couple of years is like everybody went crazy over kind of all things AI, like from the boardroom of the brands,
So
like people are
are we
talking
talking
about.
crazy about the internet bubble, or are we going crazy a little less?
Well, I mean, maybe not as much as the internet bubble, but I do think it was kind of everything was AI. First of all the companies wanted to brand themselves AI, like all the messaging was AI, AI, AI this, AI that, and I think Um, that really did siphon the boardrooms of brands and retailers saying, okay, what are we doing with AI? Like, we got to do something and so forth. Um, but again, the reality is, I think what we've seen is a lot of things that have been implemented by brands in the last few years, in a mad kind of AI rush, maybe weren't that successful. And I think the
Do you
reality
think that
is that,
they rush into it?
well, I do think that they did rush into it a bit. And I think, again, AI, as great as kind of ChatGPT is, as great as kind of I think our AI technology is, and so forth, it's still just a means to an end. Like,
Mhm.
if you're a brand, if you're a retailer, if you're any business, like you really have to think about, okay, what are the things that we are looking to solve for? Like, what are the most pressing business problems we have, either towards our customers or internally? Like, what are the things that we need to improve as a business in order to grow? Like, what's keeping us awake at night? And and then you see, okay, is the technology, AI, is that able to help us with those things rather than kind of starting with the technology? And I think technology companies are actually at fault here, because I see this in our industry as well. Like, a lot of people, a lot of the CEOs, of companies in our space, I see them talking about the technology, like AI, how great all this technology is. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm saying, well, yeah, the technology is great, but again, like, in the end of the day, it's just an enabler. Like, and if you're just deploying the technology for the sake of the
Mhm.
technology, it's not going to have the impact that you want it to. So I think, again, you have to be really thoughtful of how you do it. Now, I will say that, again, I think that there's a lot of potential. There's a lot of kind of promise, in AI for beauty. Um, and it ranges from everything. Like, it ranges not just, from the customer experience side of things, where we work, where we actually think it can kind of fundamentally change the experience that you're able to offer to the customer, but also in the background. Like, if you think about analyzing data around trends and new formulations, and what consumers care about, if you think about inventory management, if you think about, how quickly you're able to kind of ship products to consumers, the convenience of shopping, all these things. There's a lot of promise, but I do think that, you have to, instead of rushing into it just because something is AI, you really have to say, okay, this is a bottleneck for our business, and if we solve this bottleneck, this is what I think is going to happen. And this is, by the way, whatever I speak to, an executive of one of our customers, that's the question I always ask. Is like, let's say you have this AI powered customer experience in front of your customers, in front of your audience. What's going to be different? What's going to change? What's going to happen? Because, I don't want, you just to deploy a piece of technology because it's the latest trend. I want to deeply understand what is it that you want to change in your business. And then we can talk about, is it something where AI can even help, or should it be something else?
Yeah.
And yeah, that's,
And behind every a good AI tool, there should be humans.
absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's the other thing where I would kind of caution brands, in the sense that, beauty is a very, an executive of a major retailer told me that, that you know that they don't want to kind of lose the romance of beauty, is what they called it, and I
Oh,
actually think it's a very good
I
analogy,
like
because
that. I really
because
like that.
look, I mean, I just think it's such a great way to, like, beauty is very romantic, and I think there's a certain kind of elegance and certain kind of human touch that you need, and we need to be very mindful that, that we kind of retain that, because that's part of the beauty in beauty, right? I mean, so, and again, the AI is an enabler. It's not a replacement. It's not a
Absolutely.
replacement, right? And this is this is the same thing we tell everybody who's kind of saying, "Oh, we want to use AI in stores." I say, well, like, think about AI in a physical store. Um, think about it in a physical store in a way where it's kind of gives superpowers to your beauty advisors. It's not meant to replace them.
Yeah,
It's meant to
actually,
empower them and give them
that
superpowers.
that's super interesting because one of the biggest challenges that I see that young brands have is educating people in the floors in the
Yes.
stores.
Yes, exactly, exactly. And I think, again, that's I think a perfect use case for AI. And it's not about those beauty advisors in the store getting replaced by AI. And it's really about, how do we make them 10 times as good as they are? How do we really supercharge them? How do we make sure that every interaction that they have with the consumer ends up wowing the consumer? And I think that's where AI can help them, certainly not replace them. And and that's, I think that's a very important distinction.
Thank you so much, Shampoo. This was a great talk. I really enjoy every minute, and I could keep talking to you for hours.
Thanks for having me, Lara. It's really been a pleasure, and likewise, I've really enjoyed the conversation.
And to you guys, I will see you next week with more coffee number 5. Find everything you need at laraschmoisman.com or in the episode notes right below. Don't forget to subscribe. It was so good to have you here today. See you next time. Catch you on the flip side. Ciao, ciao.